I am really grateful for a chance to speak with you again this summer. The last time that I was here, we explored what it means to embrace a life of purpose. And I talked a lot about saying yes to life. That morning, I read a poem by the extraordinary Andrea Gibson, and I think Yvette might have shared this with you already, but if not, I'm saddened to just share with you that since then, Andrea has passed away after a long battle with ovarian cancer. Their words live on in their poems, their music, their truth. Andrea once said, "In the end, I want my heart to be covered with stretch marks," and believe that to be true. They revealed truth and wisdom and left us with what I am convinced will be some of the greatest quotations of all time, including, "Let your heart break so that your spirit doesn't." And if you'd indulge me for a moment, I'd just like to take a moment of silence to honor them, poet, activist, beloved human being. Andrea reminded us to say yes to life, to joy, to love. And today I want to continue that conversation, but from the other side a little bit. Today I want to talk about how living a life of a purpose isn't just about what we say yes to. It's also about when and how we say no. Saying yes fills our lives with meaning, but saying yes to everything, that is a fast track to burnout. Sometimes living purposefully means recognizing when your plate is full. Sometimes it means breathing deeply and embracing what I've come to call your holy no. Your no is sacred. It is a gift that you give to yourself and sometimes even to others. Your no does not have to be harsh or mean. It can be kind, clear, and rooted in love. So like usual, I will tell you a little story. Last October, almost a year ago, I was in the ICU for 3 weeks. It was one of the hardest seasons of my life, but I made it through and I started recovering. And when January rolled around, I thought I felt well enough to take on everything that I thought I could manage. Finishing my last semester of classes at graduate school, completing CPE training, wrapping up my internship at Wellsprings, raising my daughter, walking the dog, being a good husband, father, friend, neighbor, person, all of it. And in theology school, we are taught the importance of self-care. It is really drilled into you. How do you tend to your mind, your body, your spirit amidst the grind of graduate education? And I thought, okay, I can do this if I just stretch enough, if I just meditate enough, if I just pray enough, breathe enough, be mindful enough, I can make it through all of this. So I stacked up all of my spiritual practices. I turned them into reminders and I layered them into my day. I set alarms on my phone to pray. I put sticky notes on my laptop that said, breathe, meditate, stretch. My days were full of spirituality. And that was the problem, because my life became too full. It was full of reminders and full of expectations. It was full to bursting. I was breathing all the time, and yet I couldn't breathe. I was exhausted, and I wasn't just physically exhausted or mentally exhausted, but I became spiritually exhausted. I had said yes to everything. Everything good, everything important, everything meaningful. But as we all learn, too much, even of the good, can be overwhelming. So maybe this might look familiar to some of you. Just scroll through all the reminders and notifications on the front of my phone. There are probably 100 on there right now telling me that I need to look at something. I need to read some article. I need to find some post from a friend. Look at this picture. Don't you remember this time last year? Reminders from today, from last week, from last month. There's probably one from last year. And let's be honest. Have you ever done something like this? Hey Siri, can you set a reminder for 4 p.m. today to check all of my reminders? We live in an age of constant notification, and what starts out as helpful soon can become overwhelming. And instead of feeling supported, we can feel buried. Drowning in to-do lists and blinking red circles and little rectangles all yelling for our attention. And spiritual life can be kind of the same way. Remember to meditate. Remember to stretch. Remember to appreciate this moment that we're in. Remember to be grateful. Remember to take deep breaths. Remember to see the sacred in everything. Even the practices that are meant to sustain us can become part of the noise if we're not careful. Spiritual practices are called that because they are like exercise. They can build strength and build resilience, but overdo it and you're not energized, you are exhausted. You can become spiritually sore, spiritually fatigued, spiritually just done. I've been there. Maybe you've been there too. You know, there is a rhythm that is built into our spiritual traditions, kind of cycle of renewing and reminding. In Christianity, Lent is one of those reminders. It's traditionally 40 days of fasting, prayer, preparation. Lent calls people to focus inward and set aside distractions. And in modern times, it's usually about giving something up, chocolate, ice cream, or taking something on, maybe exercise. They are meant, these 40 days, to echo the 40 days that Jesus spent fasting and praying in the desert before beginning his ministry. And I think about that. Before stepping into the most intense, purpose-filled 3 years of his life, Jesus took 40 days to be alone, to rest, to pray, to prepare. And not just once, this happens throughout all of the Gospels. Mark in chapter 1 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went to a solitary place where he prayed. In Mark 6, he says, amid the chaos, Jesus says to his friends, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. And whether you believe Jesus was man, Messiah, or metaphor, if he needed to step away from the noise to center himself, then surely we all do too. That rhythm, that turning inward, that quiet, that pause, it's not unique to Christianity. It shows up all over. In Judaism, every week there's Shabbat, a holy pause. A full day set aside for rest, reflection, and reconnection, not as a reward for finishing some to-do list of the week, but as a commandment, a birthright, a necessity. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel called Shabbat a sanctuary in time. He wrote that while modern life may fill space with our work and our striving, it is in time, sacred time, that we find God, or the divine, or the universe, or what is meaningful to you in your life. In Buddhist practice, there is pratyahara, a withdrawal of the senses, not as escapism, but as a path toward insight. The practice of mindfulness itself is not a demand for constant awareness, but an invitation to return, to come back to the breath, to notice the present moment. One of my favorite Zen phrases, teachings of all times is, you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes every day, unless you're too busy. Then you should sit for an hour. This is ancient wisdom. This is universal wisdom, that the sacred often appears in the space in between things, in the pause, in the breath, in the desert, in the Shabbat, in that quiet hour before dawn, in the moment of stillness before the next note is played. The sacred shows up not when we power through, but when we make room. So perhaps this idea of the holy no is not just about saying no to what we don't want. It's about making space for what matters. Because if your whole life is full, so full that there's no breath even among breathing, no pause, where does the sacred have room to arrive? So what does taking a breath look like in your life? Not just physically, but spiritually. Sometimes it really is as simple as pausing and taking a deep breath. Maybe even in the middle of something. Maybe even right now. Now here's the thing that we all need to hear and to remember. Breath is not a luxury. It is not a reward for finishing everything on your to-do list. It is a requirement. It is a right. It is a sacred part of being human. And yet, how often do we rush past it? How often do we live shallowly, breathing from our chests, never stopping to let our breath drop into our bellies, into our spirits? Breath is one of the few things that we carry with us everywhere. And yet, so often, it is the first thing that we abandon in a moment of stress. That's why in so many traditions, breath is the anchor. In Hebrew, the word for spirit is ruach. It means both breath and wind. In Greek, it's pneuma. In Sanskrit, prana. In each case, the breath is more than oxygen. It's life force, soul, spirit. So when we take a breath, we're not just pausing. We are reconnecting with ourselves, with the sacred, with our full humanity. And when we say no, with breath, with care, with clarity, we create a space where our yes can mean something again. So let's talk a little bit more about this holy no. There's an old saying that every yes is a no to something else. And that reverse is true too. Every time we say no, we're making space for a deeper yes. We live in a culture that rewards overcommitment, that glamorizes hustle, grind culture, that congratulates people for how tired they are. But being tired is not a virtue. Burnout is not some badge of honor. And being stretched too thin doesn't make you holy. It makes you hollow. And yet, we often feel guilty for saying no. We're afraid of disappointing people, or afraid of seeming selfish, or afraid of missing out. We develop FOMO just to name that fear of missing out. But here's the thing, your no is not selfish. Your no can be the boundary that protects your health. Your no can be the pause that brings clarity. Your no can be the space where healing begins. And sometimes your no is the most loving thing that you can offer. There's a kind of spiritual maturity that comes from learning to say no with intention and compassion and care. Not out of a fear or avoidance, but from a deep well of self-understanding. Sometimes no is the bravest prayer that we can speak. And friends, I want to be clear, saying a holy no does not mean turning away from justice or from the world's needs. In fact, sometimes our no is a form of holy resistance. No, I will not stay silent while trans youth are targeted. No, I will not allow color to be criminalized. No, I will not pretend everything is fine while our democracy is being dismantled. No, I will not collude with fascism, with white supremacy, with the politics of cruelty, even with my silence. No, I will not allow the murder of truth and of love. These are sacred refusals. These are the boundaries that protect the soul of a people. These are the no's that make room for the yes of justice, of compassion, of liberation. There are so many ways that this shows up in our lives. Think about the parent who says no to another volunteer commitment, not because they don't care, but because they need to protect that small window of time they still have to tuck their child into bed at night. Think about the retiree who says no to being pulled back into leadership, not because they've stopped contributing, but because they finally have the space to say yes to their long postponed art or writing or travel or rest. Think about the justice organizer who takes a sabbatical, not because they've lost their fire, but because they know burnout helps no one, and that rest fuels resistance. Shout out to Tricia Hersey. These are holy no's. They are rooted in truth, offered with love, and anchored in breath. So what happens when a community learns how to say a holy no together? When we create space not just in our personal lives, but in our shared life, we become a place where people can breathe. Where showing up with your full, messy, sacred humanity is enough. Where your value isn't tied to how much you give, or how much you do, or how much you produce. Where, no, I can't this time, is not met with guilt, but with gratitude. This is what beloved community can be. And underneath all the noise, all the apps, all the notifications, you remember what's important to you. If you can't see, that's a picture of my daughter, Willow. Underneath the noise, beneath the reminders, the shouts, the little red circles, what is calling to you? What needs rest? What deserves your yes, and what needs your no? We can help each other find out. This community exists for that, for taking a breath, for holding the silence, for listening to that still small voice inside of us. The voice that sometimes whispers, "You've done enough," or "You're not ready," or even, "It's time to go." These are holy voices too. So friends, may you take your breath. May you find your sacred no. And may you carve out a sanctuary in time wherever you are. May we help one another build a world where no one has to earn rest and no one forgets how to breathe. Amen. May it be so.